All right, guys, welcome to this week's episode. I'm super excited because I'm joined with someone who's built a reputation for helping people rise above their limits, step into their highest version of themselves. Brandon Burns is a performance coach. He's an entrepreneur and a speaker whose journey really started from early adversity and leading into an really inspiring at the highest levels. He's really given him a deep understanding of what it really takes to grow, to evolve, and to live with true purpose in your life. And what I love about this guy is he doesn't just talk motivation, he lives the work. His approach to mindset, consistency, personal transformation has impacted athletes, entrepreneurs, and everyday people who's just ready to level up their lives. Brandon, I'm excited to dive into your story, your perspective, and really wherever this conversation takes us today. I really want to thank you for taking the time and being here and having you as my guest, man. So it's been fun. I followed your stuff. I know first time I've kind of gotten connected because you were hosting a couple calls with some groups that we're a part of. And the first thing I really wanted to just kind of start it off for people who might not know your story yet, kind of what's the part of your journey that you feel really shaped you most into like the man you are today and like I said, going out and leading with purpose, true purpose?
Yeah. Well, first of all, really appreciate you taking the time to have me on. Appreciate the opportunity. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. You know, before we started rolling here, we were just talking about how the best conversations are the ones that are spirit led and they just go wherever they're going to go and it's not pre-scripted. So I think that's what we're going to do today. So I'm excited about it. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version, man. It's usually about a 45-minute keynote, but the quick version is born and raised in a 900 square foot home in East Limestone County, Alabama, to a single mother. My parents, stepdad jumped in very, very early on. My bio dad left before I was born. Stepdad moved in when I was 2-3 years old. We went bankrupt when I was about 11. And then I actually started gymnastics when I was 10 years old. Did that just recreationally for 6 years. Started competing at 16. Jumped all the way into the deep end. So I went from a recreational gymnast to a level 10, which is the highest level that there is before you go on to college or elite. Ended up being a walk-on at the University of Michigan when I was 18. So that was a culture shock going from Alabama all the way up to Ann Arbor. Lived there for 6 years. Unfortunately, I was cut from that team 4 times in 5 years and then ended up winning 2 Big Ten championships as a coach of the same team that I was cut from. Met a guy named Eric Thomas in the process. He put a microphone in my hand for the first time. And then here we are today. So that's the speedy version,
Right. Yeah. It's, you start hanging around people like Eric and stuff. They're going to push you into places that you might not have ever thought.
Well, that's a really good point, because I was always an introvert. And when I say I was an introvert, I don't mean that I didn't enjoy talking to people. I mean that as a 21, 22-year-old fifth year senior at the University of Michigan, I would literally have panic attacks on the first day of class because I would have to stand up in front of 20 of my classmates and say, hey, my name's Brandon and I'm studying economics and psychology. Like that would give me panic attacks. So I hated talking to people and I never, ever, ever wanted to be on stage. I never wanted to have any sort of career in the speaking industry. But when I got connected with ET, he literally said, I don't care that you're an introvert. I think you have a story. I think you can help people. We're going to walk you through this. And I think that's such an important part of my story is just getting around people who saw more in me than I saw in myself and who believed in me more than I believed in myself. And I think if you don't have people around you like that, man, it's so tough to push you the way that somebody else can push you, especially somebody, like that.
Right. Well, and I think that's what's so important about, you hear all the time, you're going to be defined by your circle, right? Like those people. And, I did a couple reels not too long ago about talking about, you call your mat carriers, right? But it's kind of out of Mark 2, where those 4 guys that were around their paralyzed friend, they're the ones that brought them to Jesus. They broke open it and lowered him down through the roof. So they destroyed a guy's house, right? Just to get their buddy healed. And, it's interesting because when you read that, it says by their faith, you were healed, right? And so being surrounded, like I think every man needs that circle because there's a lot of times we might not be as expressive to our wives, to other people, but where you have a close knit group of men where you can just open up and to have those guys that will also call you out on your crap, right? If you're going down a road that you don't need to, and we need to be able to be accepting of that, right? And not like pound them on it when they're calling us out. But, I think, something that I've kind of gleaned from some of your stuff, though, it's, if it wasn't for that circle of people that you ended up being around, like, how different do you think your life would be today versus,
Man,
you know?
I can't even. It's honestly scary for me to imagine what it would be like. I think whenever I talk about being connected with Eric Thomas as a mentor and getting around him and the immersion of that experience, I think a lot of people automatically think of entrepreneurship, or they think of a speaking career, or they think of professional accomplishments. And trust me, he's helped me in that regard to an unbelievable extent. I mean, when you get to look at an industry from the inside out and you get to see it from the very top of the game, you just learn so much faster than if you had tried to climb that mountain by yourself. So I think there is a level of humility that's required to say, well, I'm not at the top yet. Let me go serve the people who are and see what I can learn and glean from that process. So that was very impactful. But at the end of the day, the way that people like ET and that whole circle of people have impacted me the most is through the way I've watched him treat his wife throughout the whole process. It's the way I've watched him pray before he goes on stage throughout the process. It's the way that, he'll call and just check in for no reason and say, hey man, how you doing spiritually? Like, are you on track? Are you still,
Right.
are you doubting? Are you okay? That kind of stuff, and the way that he's changed who I am, not just what I'm capable of doing in the world, that's by far been the biggest impact. So I would not only be a much less impressive person without him and people like that, I'd be a worse person.
Right. What I think it's so important too, because mentorship, coaching, just all of that. But especially, I mean, you and I are about 20 years difference. I'm almost 50. You're almost 30, right? So,
Yep.
few years difference. But I know for myself, as I was going, especially on the entrepreneurial journey, having those men around you that have been there, that have done it, that have seen the pitfalls, seen ways to scale that we would never even think about, but having that, I know you're a huge proponent of coaching, and you offer it as well because, again, we don't know what we don't know, right? And there's that old saying, you don't know what you don't know, and you won't know till you do. And sometimes when you do know it, right? Sometimes we went through a lot of pain where we could have just sought out the mentorship of somebody that's already been there. And, I think that's what's so cool about your relationship with Eric is, seeing that, like, okay, here's a super successful guy, and he's the same guy on stage that he is behind the stage. Like, he's passionate about his faith. He's passionate about his wife. And so many people, sadly, when you meet him for the first time, or you kind of get to know him, you're like, dude, I kind of looked up to this dude, and he's kind of a jerk. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. So,
And again, it just speaks to the importance of having real people around you that will be honest with you and that you can be honest with them.
right.
I can't tell you how many people in this industry that I've met where within the first 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, you're lying. Your whole brand and persona is completely a lie,
Right.
and then you get around people like ET where, I served as his booking agent for a long time, still do. But when I was coming up with him, I remember we got an offer for a gig that was $100,000 for a 45-minute keynote, and they were going to fly him in on a private jet. So you get the PJ travel covered, and then you get $100,000 for 45 minutes of your time. And it was on his daughter's birthday, and his daughter was grown. I mean, she was early 20s. And I went to him with the offer and said, I think this is a good one. Do you want to take it? And he says, tell them, they can move the date and I can come the next day or the day before, but otherwise it's a no. And I'm like, you sure? I mean, I kind of double taked right there. I'm like, I mean, she can jump on the PJ with you. What are you talking about?
Right.
Just seeing that level of character and integrity where he really does keep the first thing first. That's so rare and so uncommon in this industry. A lot of people get into speaking or social media because they want to be famous and they want to get that validation and affirmation. And in many ways, I'm very grateful for the fact that I've got role models like ET who do keep the first thing first and are grounded in a foundation of principles. But also, I'm grateful for the fact that I never really wanted to do this.
Yeah.
I don't really care
Yeah.
if people know who I am or not. And so I think that has been a blessing in disguise in some sense.
Yeah. And again, I think for so long now, it seems like, it's almost like masculinity has been demonized, or being a man, being a masculine man, right? That whole toxic masculine stuff, which I'm like, look, at the end of the day, if I'm walking down the street with my wife, do I want to be the guy that jumps in front of her, between her and the attacker, or the guy that puts her in front of, right? And, like I know that the man that God's created me to be a provider, be a protector, to be a lover, to be all that kind of stuff. And to be, again, to have that circle of men around you that will hold you up to keep you to account. Because I know so many men battle with things. And I heard it said on a podcast not too long ago, the most dangerous thing a man can say is, "I got this." Right?
And
Instead of bending their knee to Christ and saying, "I don't have this," right? Like, "I need your help. I don't have this." But for us, it's one of those most, like I said, it really resonates, 'cause I think about so many times in my life where I'm going through some struggles, whether it's professionally or even in marriage. I've been married almost 30 years. And so I was basically almost married when you were born. And but we got to this point, right, where it was like, so many times I had that attitude. I can handle it. I got it. And never truly bending my knee to the creator and saying, I don't have this. I
you know,
need you.
I love that you said that. I've never talked about this story publicly, by the way. This only happened maybe 6 months ago or so. I was doing my first ever bodybuilding competition, and I was doing it in the OCB, which anybody who knows about the bodybuilding world is the most strict natural federation that there is. You can get away with absolutely nothing. There was even over-the-counter stuff that I had to stop taking so that I could be eligible
Right.
to compete. So you can't get away with anything. And so the preparation for that, I did a soft 4 months and a hard 3 months of
Right.
preparation. I eased into it a little bit. But that 3 months, man, it was honestly a spiritual fast, because if you think about it, there's no bad foods, there's no junk food. Everything is strictly tracked. It's all incredibly healthy. There's very few supplements. Obviously, there's no alcohol. There's no any other sort of substances. There's no vices. You can't even go out
Yeah.
to eat with your friends. So
Right.
there's zero vices this entire time. And it was a very spiritual fast for me. So I did that for 3 months straight. And I remember about a week leading up to the show, and of course your mind starts to get crazy at that point. You're 5% body fat, so your mind and your body are a little bit all over the place. But at the same time, I was incredibly clear, because that was truthfully the longest I had gone. I think one thing that I learned from that experience is it's one thing to be able to deal with your vices effectively and still be productive and a high performer. It's another thing to eliminate them completely. Those are two
Hmm.
different levels of discipline. And so that was my version of eliminating everything completely for 3 months. And I remember sitting out there on the balcony of my apartment, this penthouse apartment, corner unit in downtown Nashville, overlooking the city, most exclusive building in the city. We've got a Pagani dealership downstairs where most people have like a 7-Eleven in that little retail space.
Right.
They were selling $3-4 million cars down there. We had the Rolex on my wrist and all this stuff. And I remember sitting there and thinking, God, I'm kind of unhappy. Like everything looks very perfect. Like I look great. Business is good. Like I'm just not really feeling it though. And I didn't necessarily hear a voice, but I heard something speak from the inside out. Are you
Right.
done yet? Are you done doing it your way? Are you done trying to be the boss man that has it under control? You can take care of anything. Like you got this. Exactly what you just said. And I said, God, I think I'm done. I think I want to try this your way, because I've tried it my way. I've tried it the world's way. And from the outside looking in, it worked. But from the inside looking out, something was broken. And
Right.
I've been a believer for a long time at that point. Like I said, this is maybe 6 months ago. But I do think that, no matter how successful you are or how strong you are, especially as a man, until you get to that point where you can say, I can have my own strength and I can develop my own strength and my own success. But at the end of the day, if you don't, as you said, bend that knee to Christ, it's going to be limited, because the
Hmm.
scripture says, eyes have not seen, ears have not heard what I've
Right.
got for you. And so
Right.
to me, what that says is, if I can dream it, if I can dream of the car or the apartment or the stages or whatever these worldly successes I desire are, cool, you can go get it. But that's not all that God has for you, because what God has
Right.
for you, eyes have not seen and ears have not heard. So you're actually limiting yourself by even following your own visions. Until you submit to his will for your life, you'll never know what you're truly capable of.
Right. And I think that's where most people, they miss it, because I know you and I both know people that are, from the world standards, wildly successful and miserable, right?
Yeah.
Miserable. And, when you think about how we were created and, how God formed us in that dust, right? And we're basically just formless being, but then he breathed, like literally nostril, nostril, right? Breathed the spirit into us. And what's interesting, and you talk about the difference between men and women, like we were kind of formed in the wilderness, and then it says he placed us into the garden, right? So that's why we're always rambunctious and want to be out, right? Like that's where we're created. But I think that's where most people they never find that true contentment, because they get to this point where they're having that battle, like, man, bank account's awesome, this is awesome, but man, I still feel empty. I still feel like there's something missing. And I think that's because if you don't have that relationship with your creator, right, with your father, right, that created you, there's still that void there where it's just like,
Absolutely.
what am I missing? And then I know for me, I got saved when I was 24, and it was kind of that deal. My wife got saved 2 years before me, but ego, I wanted to be number one. Like I wanted to be the man in her life, and I knew she loved God more than me, right? Like I knew she's talking to Jesus all the time, and I'm like, oh, I want to be number one. And that's what ultimately literally broke my heart when I realized one day, it was April 10th of 2000. I'll never forget it. I I, I it broke my heart with the realization I was trying to come between her and God, like her and her heavenly Father. And man, it broke. I don't know if I've ever cried that hard in my life. Like I was just sobbing. And I was like, oh, I don't want to be number one. And like every day now, I think God, she loves him more than me because I screw up all the time. You know what I'm saying? But he's always been that constant from that point on through our marriage, where like things like divorce, things like that is never even an option, right?
Mhm.
Because we made this covenant with each other and with God. And then I think, because I lived a fairly wild life up to that point, especially through my teenage years, I was a mess. But and I always had that mindset: if I serve God, I'm going to be missing out on something. And now, ever since I've gotten saved, I've been to 30 countries with the gospel. I've lived this pretty crazy life through the church. And I'm like, now I think, what did I miss out by not serving him?
Right, right.
You
Well, I
know?
think that's where we get confused is, especially as men, we think that the North Star is some version of worldly success, right? We want
Mhm.
to have the best-selling book or get on the big stage and have the followers or the car or the house or whatever it is for us, right? We all have our different versions of that. And I don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong with desiring those things, because otherwise God would not have placed those desires in your heart. I actually think that worldly desire is a very interesting mechanism for personal development. I think that God kind of knew what he was doing. He was like, okay,
Right.
because you are weak in your flesh, I'm going to dangle these carrots in front of you because that's
Right.
what's going to make you run towards it. But in the process thereof, you're going to have to become the version of you that I actually had in mind when I created you, so
Right.
that you will then be able to get those things and steward those things once you have them. But I think what a lot of men don't realize is that you will never truly be fully happy until you feel as though you have genuinely exploited your potential for God. And again,
Right.
you're not going to get there without letting God show you what he's really got for you. You're not going to get there on your own. You're always going to feel like, okay, I'm doing good, but there's something else. I'm doing
Hmm.
good, but there's something missing. What that missing thing is God's mission and purpose and calling and anointing over your life. And until
Right.
you figure that out and you submit to that, you're going to have that void in your heart. And I want to say it was Myron Golden who said that the challenge that we have with that is we have to submit for God's calling to our life before we see what God's calling for our life looks like. I always
Hmm.
say all the time, like Inky Johnson, big speaker in our space, very tapped into our ecosystem, with ET and all of that. I think if God had went to him as a, 18, 19-year-old and said, listen, man, I'm going to have to crush your NFL dreams. I'm going to have to rip that away from you and also paralyze a part of your body, but you're going to be great. And you're going to do so much good work in this world and your name will be known around the world. And we're going to help, you're going to help so many people. I don't know if 18, 19-year-old Inky is taking that deal. 18,
Right.
19-year-old Brandon's not going to take that deal because I
Right.
want what I want. So again, you have to submit to that vision before you fully know and understand what that vision is, because at the end of the day, God never asked you to figure out how. He asked you to submit to his will.
Right. Well, and I think that's the biggest the biggest problem we have, especially as men, as human nature, like we want to know that end, right? Like we want to know where we end up. We want to know exactly. And, we all seen that graphic where, what people think success looks like and then what it actually looks like. Well, I think if he would tell us that at the beginning, we would screw it up so much because there's so many learning and you said it several times, submit. I think most people don't understand the power of submission. Like they look at it as something weak, and it's not, man. We have this misconception of what submission truly is. And especially I know as men, we're like, oh, I'm not gonna submit to nothing, right? Like we're gonna be the man and take care of it and do it, whatever. But until you're willing to truly submit, because I know some of the hardest times in my life looking back, I'm like, man, thank God I went through that because I grew, I learned, I was able to do it. But in the moment, it was hell. You're thinking, man, what in the world? Like, and you would never, just like you're saying, you would never pick that if in the moment you'd be like, no, I'd rather have my NFL career. Like, it's cool. Like, don't put me through all that. But man, not knowing and that, and then going into, that's where having that faith of knowing that, okay, this moment is not going to define me. This injury, this tragedy, this whatever is not going to define me because I know it's a step leading. And I always looked at in the Psalms where it says, your words a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. And I always had that vision in our mind when that was written, 1,500 years ago, whatever it was. They didn't have Q beams, man. You couldn't see a mile down the road, right? Like you had a lantern or a torch, so you could see that step, right? Just that next step. And
Mm-hmm.
I think God always leads us in those steps versus, jumps, and it's not to say you can't exponentially do it, but I think too, you had said this earlier, you brought the word stewardship. Okay. Are you being a faithful steward of where you're currently planted? And over the little, I joke with my boys all the time, which now they're adults, are 19, 21, 23. And we talk about tithing all the time. I'm like, if you can't tithe $10 out of 100, how are you going to do 100 out of 1,000? How are you going to do 1,000 out of 10,000? How are you going to do 10,000 out of 100? If you have trouble with doing $10, why would he give you why would he give you more if you
Why would
can't
he
steward
trust
that
you?
little?
Why would he trust you with a lot if he can't trust you with a little?
Yeah.
And then to your point, I do think that Scripture never asked us to come up with a 20-step plan on how to get where we
Right.
go in life. What it did ask us to do is everything your hands find to do with all your might, including, I didn't bring this up earlier, but I worked as a janitor at a gymnastics camp when I was 16 years old. And that was how I got the letter of recommendation to end up going to the University of Michigan and be on their team. And that's the only reason, because I was in Michigan, that I was able to then go on to meet and connect with Eric Thomas. So imagine if when they had asked me to clean their toilets, my attitude was, man, screw this. This is not becoming or worthy of me. I'm better than that. Blah, blah. No, everything your hands find to do with all your might. I still remember before I left for camp that summer, my mom looked at me and said, son, if you're going to clean their toilets, be the best damn toilet cleaner they've ever seen. And I took that to heart. And
Right.
that was what got the ball rolling for everything else. Really quickly, though, I do want to go back to that idea of submission, because I think this is critical. Because to your point, a lot of men see that as weakness. In reality, a weak man cannot submit, because submission must be a choice. And
Right.
so if you do not have the strength or the power to be able to rebel and consciously choose not to rebel, it's not really submission. You're just kind of doing what the only option on the table is for you, right?
Right.
And I think that the Passion of Christ illustrates that incredibly. If we believe the doctrine that Christ was Lord and that he was God incarnate, there's nothing logically that says he can't sit there on that cross and just say, you know what, screw it. Everybody's dead. Fire rains down. We're going to restart. We're starting over with better humans because y'all suck. Like, why wouldn't you do that? That's the logical thing to do
Right.
in that moment. But he says, no, I'm going to make this sacrifice, and I'm choosing through my strength, not through my weakness, to choose to submit. And that's what we have to do with God.
Right. 100%, and it's such a deal, him going through. And again, we talk about the people around us, like even Jesus brought some of his disciples at that moment, was like, I need you to pray with me. Right. And of course they kept falling asleep, but they're like, I need you guys. Like, so if you think about the importance of having that closeness of people around you and being willing to say, okay, not my will, because he knew what was coming, and who in the world would ever choose that, right? Like, I mean, it was 12 plus hours of just insane torture's not even the strong enough word for it, but just everything he went through, and to being willing again to bend his knee to his father, say, man, okay, if if there's another way, right? I mean, even Jesus, like, if there's another way, please let me know, right? But if not, all right, your will being done, and I know I've experienced this so many times in my life and my marriage where it's just like, man, you think you have this plan laid out, and then you almost try everything you can do to make that happen when it's not the plan, because and we don't get revelation of that because we're not willing to, again, start our day with saying, all right, God, hey, today's your day. Whatever you bring, whatever opportunities you bring up, or whatever doors need to be opened and or closed, I'm going to trust you because I've forced open doors in my life, and it's cost me a lot, right? Not only financially, but in a lot of ways, because I'm like, I want to kick through this freaking door no matter what, and I've had to learn, man, over the years. It's like, why didn't I just stop and be like, all right, God, is this really your direction for me right now? Is
Yes.
this really what you want to do?
That polarity is so important because ambitious driven people struggle with that. I struggled with
Yeah,
that for a very long time. I remember I would be doing podcasts sitting where you are, and I would ask my guests, like, how do you balance this struggle between drive and ambition and this go-getter mentality with, hey, I got to submit to God's will for my life, and I got to see
right.
what he wants me to do, not necessarily what I want me to do. And I think the answer is, if you can get to a space and a place where you are confident that God has planted this mission or this calling within you, and you feel that alignment and that anointing, go be a go-getter, go after it, go get it. But if it's coming from a selfish place, you're probably going to end up setting yourself back more than you're going to move your life
Yeah,
forward. Because at the end of the day, if you run full speed in the wrong direction, buddy, you're still losing ground. You're doing it
right.
quickly, but you're losing ground.
Yeah, 100%. And I think some of this, a lot of what we're talking about, which I really resonate with kind of, for lack of a better word, your mantra, but like that freaking every day means every day, right? And how many of people say, I'm a Christian, I go to church once a week, or or Easter and Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
I pray every now and then, or I eat like I'm supposed to sometimes, but just having that discipline of, like, make every day count, make every day matter, and it should mean every day, right? And kind of forming that into that discipline that we all need to, again, if you want to achieve anything, it's in those little bitty daily actions that we do. It's not, yeah, I mean, we've all had opportunities where something scaled and it feels like something just went like a quantum leap. But
Mm-hmm.
what led up to that, right? Like you were saying, you know, if looking back, and I know that you were cleaning the gym and everything to pay for, right, to be able to train and stuff. So it's like, okay, if you weren't good enough or disciplined enough, right, to do the menial in most people's eyes, right, to be the janitor daily, clean up like you're supposed to, and be diligent and disciplined in those small daily actions, would that have ever opened up a door for X, Y, and Z, and then led you on, to the rest of your journey, right, where it started? And I think that's where so many people miss it. They don't think about that simple idea, like, every day,
Yeah.
right? I need to do it. And so, like, where was that real revelation for you that really happened? That it's like, I need to take daily, like, really hammer this thing out.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny because that's the only thing that was truly organic. Coming up as a speaker, you're always trying to find these little catchphrases or these one-liners or these things that are a good branding material, right? People can
Right.
remember it. It's sticky. It's got a good story to it. And a relatively smart guy, went to a good school, was studying a bunch of people in the industry, and I came up with 17 different things. And I thought, oh, this is the one. Every day means every day was the only one that I did not try to come up with, which is how I know it
Right.
was given to me, by
Right.
God. I was actually in Big Ten Network Studios in Chicago, Illinois. And again, as a lifelong introvert, I was just buzzing with excitement because I had just done my first ever live television broadcast, 2 hours straight, live on the air, commentating the sport that I love so dearly. Put down the headphones, got up, walked out of the studio. This guy grabs me and says, how often do you work out? Just instinctively, I said, well, every day. And they looked really confused and kind of went, well, what do you mean by that, though? I mean, give me some more detail. And I said, well, I'm confused why you're confused because I just told you I work out every day. So I don't really understand where the ambiguity is in that sentence.
Yeah. What did you
And,
understand about every day?
right. I thought that was pretty plain English, you know? And in that moment, I just had this revelation that so many people have such low standards that even the idea of articulating the fact that you're dedicated and committed to a daily practice is simply unbelievable to them. And I thought, well, what would happen to all of us if we would simply uphold the standards that we have set for? That doesn't even have to be anybody else's standards, the ones that we have set for ourselves. If we just didn't let ourselves down on a daily basis, what would happen? What would our lives look like? Because again, you show me your daily choices, not your occasional choices, and I'll show you what you really value and care about.
Right.
And so that's where it came from. You know, for me, working out every day has very little to do with getting big arms or anything like that. I mean, it's cool. It's a nice side effect. But at the end of the day, it really is about me being able to look in the mirror and know who I am. And as I've grown, I've realized that that philosophy can be expanded to everything. You know, I think the unfortunate thing is most people will anchor their identity in who they used to be or who they were one or two times. You know, oh, I worked really hard that one time. I was really dedicated and disciplined that one time. I was a really good person and did the right thing even when it wasn't convenient a couple times. Okay, and you can be the Pope today, and if you rob a bank tomorrow, you're still going to go to jail. No one cares who you were yesterday. It don't make a difference. And so I just think that idea of reaffirming who you are based on daily action is so important for anybody who wants to not only achieve anything big, but also be who God called them to be. He didn't say, if I remember the scripture correctly, you could correct me, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't say pick up your cross and follow me when you feel like it.
Right.
Pretty sure it says daily.
Right. Well, and it's, you bring that up because it's always that old cliche of, in so many movies or TV shows, you have the guy who was talking about his old football days, right?
Yeah.
And that was like it. Like that was his glory. And then from then on, it's like, remember when I did X? Or on a flip side, the sad part is where people use death or tragedy or something and that defines them and stops them. We know those people that may have lost a loved one, even heaven forbid lost a child 10 years ago. And in that moment, it was like, well, 10 years ago, I lost my baby, or I lost my child. And it's like, it just was that almost this big wall or whatever you want to call it that just stops them and it defines their whole future.
Yeah.
And you have other people that will take a similar situation and really be like, okay, I can't change it. Right. Like that's, I had some talks with a guy named Hal Elrod and he was talking about that, right? Like he has a really crazy story. He's been through a lot of crazy stuff. And he has this mentality of like, okay, once an event happens, I can't change it. Now I'm going to give myself 5 minutes, whether I want to scream, cuss, yell, laugh, whatever. Like, okay. And then once I do that, I can't change it. So what am I going to do from here on? And I think that's where so many people don't get it. Like if something happens, man, it's done.
Yeah.
And you can't go back and change anything. Now, what are you going to do with that? Or, and again, he's used some of these really hard times to then develop and to go on to help a lot of people not get stuck in that. But, it's crazy on both sides of it. Either someone has this phenomenal, successful one-time thing, and that's their identity now, or a tragedy that's their identity, and then it stops them. And I think that's where I think about the parable of the talents, where I think that's where so many people is that last guy that just buries it.
Yeah.
And they're too scared, to do anything because it's like, okay, well, I had that glory or I had this tragedy and it's fear, right? Like I'm just too scared to go what's next, because if it's something that's horrible, they're going to think, well, something bad could happen again, or it can never be better than it was.
Yeah.
Like, I hit my apex at 18.
Peaked. I peaked in high school. No, all right, sure. You peaked in high school because you decided to, man.
Right.
A lot of people say you can't change the past. I completely disagree with that. I think you can 100% change the past. And I think the way that you do it is by changing your present. So you can imagine somebody goes through a horrific tragedy, a terrible moment like that, and then somebody uses that as their excuse to say, well, I'm never going to go out, put myself out there again. I'm never going to try anything again because I'm scared this is going to happen. Or you take that same person that went through the same event and they say, I'm going to use this to go bless other people. I'm going to tell them what I learned in the process. I'm going to use it to get
Hmm.
me closer to God, make me stronger. You just changed the past. You just
Right.
changed what that event meant. Now, you might not
Right.
be able to change what happened, but you can change what it meant and where things are
Hmm.
going from here. And now the meaning and significance and definition of the past has completely changed based on what you choose to do with it right now. And one thing I'll tell you from experience is that if you do suffer from that fear of failure, or that fear of, well, what if this happens to me again? Or what if, something horrible happens? The more you train that muscle, the stronger it gets. It's just like we're
Hmm.
both gym guys. So the more
Right.
it's like anything else. Like you do a bunch of curls, your curls are going to get easier. You do a bunch of back squats are going to get easier. And going through adversity and opposition is exactly the same way. And I'm at a point now, thankfully, where I've truly just been through so much. And my life is not a sob story. I never went hungry or homeless when I was young or anything like that. But so many different challenging situations, whether it be emotional stuff, whether it be financial challenge, whether it be, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation at times, whether it be professional failures. I've just experienced so many of them that at this point, I'm like, you know what? Come on, bring it.
Right.
Let's go. Like, I'll figure it out. I really
Right.
have so much belief in myself that I'll be able to figure it out. But you can't build that belief that you'll be able to get back up and keep pressing forward if you never get back up the first time.
Right. Right. It's like Jim Rohn used to say, you can't hire someone to do your push-ups for you, right? Like
Yeah.
you got to do the work, man. Like, and I think so many people don't understand the strength that comes out of some of that stuff. My wife grew up in a house. She witnessed a lot. Thankfully, she wasn't abused, but she witnessed her mom a lot of physical abuse, a lot of drug and alcohol abuse, and all this. And I tell her all the time, I'm like, the way that because of that, and I didn't grow up around that. I mean, we've been together since we were 15, so I witnessed a lot, but I didn't grow. I had a fairly stable household, and I'm like the way you can relate to people on a level that I can never, because all that stuff that you went through has built you to this person now that where if someone's going through some of that, man, the strength that you have from that, and yeah, in the moment it was hell, I mean, she witnessed a lot of horrible things, but it's like, man, there's so much power that comes from that now in the way that she can minister to people or talk with people or have compassion that it's honestly on a level I don't have. I envy it. Like it's like, man, like because I'm a real black and white guy sometimes. And it's just like, well, it's like freaking quit doing it. Like let's, it's like there's kind of some empathy sometimes that I I see so much potential in people and I'm like, well, you can do this, quit letting that, and I'm real kind of black and white with it, but she can hit them on a level I can never have,
Yeah.
and really going through all of that, and I think people miss
That's
it.
an experience that you can't replicate it. You can't get that
Right.
from a book. You can't take a seminar on that. I love when people first get into the speaking and coaching industry and they're like, well, should I go get this certification in behavioral coaching therapy? And I'm like, no, like, because what you're not going to be able to match genuine empathy based on lived experience. And I
Right.
remember being in my apartment in Michigan, 5, 6 years ago when I first truly got saved. And I was praying about, like, God, I want to really help people. Like, I really want that to be my legacy. I want that to be my life's mission and calling. I want to be able to help people. And I didn't understand the consequences and the level of preparation that was necessary to go along with that. And I do think that a lot of us confuse God's preparation for God's punishment. And we
Right.
think, well, God, why am I going through this? Because that was my story. Because I certainly haven't had the worst experience in any one domain of life, but I've had a plethora of, you could call it trauma or you could call it whatever, but just so many different varieties. Again, whether it be family stuff, financial stuff, whether it be work stuff, personal stuff, relationships, like there's just so many different boxes I've checked where now when I get in a room, I can pretty much with full conviction say, I don't know what you're going through right now, but I've either been there or I've been adjacent to there. I've been close enough.
Right.
Like I get it. And
Right.
that gives me, to your point, that level of empathy where I can understand people at a level to where you can truly help them, you know?
Right.
So I think that for anyone who does feel that type of calling on their life, you have to accept the preparation that comes from it. And here's the other thing too. If your calling is important enough to God's mission, he might not leave that preparation to chance.
Right.
He might not let you have quite the level of autonomy that some other people have because he can afford to lose them. I remember this Jamie Foxx special where he was after his stroke, and he came back into this Netflix special, and he said, "Man, I was fighting with God. I was angry. I was upset because I look around, I see all these other people that are getting away with so much more, and then it's like, man, I try and do one little thing, step out of line a little bit, and it's just boom, smacks back down, and I don't
Right.
get it. And I don't understand why you're so much harder on me." And he said the answer he got from God was, "Well, those other people already belong to someone else. You belong to me. And I can't risk you screwing this up because you're too
Right.
important to the mission." And so again, people confuse God's preparation for God's punishment. He might force you to go through a couple of things for the benefit of not just yourself, which you won't see in the moment, but
Right.
also for the benefit of all of his other people that you're going to impact and help.
Yeah, our pastor always jokes. He said, God has a plan. He will succeed one way or the other, but you have the chance to participate. And I
Mm-hmm.
think there's so many ways that sometimes, that's again the choice to participate in it, and understanding that, what you might be going through currently, it's in just what you said, preparation for something. It's not a punishment, or, because I mean, I was laughing because I was thinking about this the other day, that if you look at before the sin, right? People think God's a God of rules and he's hard, da da da. There was one thou shalt not. One before one, right? Everything else was thou shalt, right? Like you could do freaking anything you want, basically. Like it was all thou shalt, thou shalt. And then there was one, just one. Just don't eat from that tree. That was it. And if you recognize, and I love the way that, especially throughout the gospels, everything, that family relationship, because everyone can relate. Like, would you as a father, want to just, push down, and, or do you want the best for your kids? And do you, because of discipline, I told my boys their whole life, I'm your dad first, your friend second. There'll be times you probably won't like me, and I am 100% okay with that. I don't care, because I did a lot of stupid crap as a kid, and you don't understand the rule of unintended consequences. I do, because you're not even looking 3 steps out. You're looking in the moment. Because of that decision, it could have caused this, this, and this you ain't even thinking about. Right. And it's like, and I look at God that way too. It's like he's there's things that we're going to go through in life. It's not a punishment. It's not like we need discipline sometimes, because we're not a kids getting out of line, right? Like sometimes we need sometimes that force, because of just like what you said. He already knows the end. I don't. I don't know what he has prepared, or I don't know that next person that I'm going to run across, and all of a sudden, man, they need to hear what, I'm going to be able to hit them on that level, because man, I've been it. I did it. I went through it, and I understand it at that level. And, so many people look at it as such a different ways, or think that, God's this, this tyrant ruler, right? That is looking and is like, just wants to punish everybody, and, and all this stuff. And, and then of course, in today's world, what's celebrated? Freaking victimhood celebrated, right? Like, you almost get, exalted if you're a victim nowadays, and it's like, so now everyone wants to play poor me and be the victim of everything. Well, this all happened to me. And I just, give me all this empathy and all this care, and do all this stuff for me, versus, understanding that, there's no victory ever being in, having that victim mentality. And, but sadly, it's celebrated, right? Like, and we see it in every area of life now, versus people saying, okay, that sucked. What did I learn from it? And how can this, it's that old saying, life is happening for me and not to me. Okay, I
Absolutely.
went through it, right? But how did that happen for me? How can I use this, right, to be at that?
I heard Pastor Philip Anthony Mitchell on a podcast yesterday or 2 days ago, and he said that God is more concerned with your holiness than your happiness.
Right.
And I think that a lot of us, we have this perception of God that he's supposed to be there to just make everything easy, make everything
Right.
happy, make everything smooth. And it's like, no, he's concerned with who you could be and who you should be. And that's not always a
Mhm.
fun, happy process. And I think
Right.
when you shift your perspective to, okay, maybe he's trying to make me holier, not just happy. I think that that is a very empowering perspective. And it's difficult because, to your point, not only is victimhood celebrated, but I think part of the reason that victimhood is celebrated right now is because cheap attention in any and all forms is celebrated right now. People are more concerned with being impressive than impactful. They're more concerned with how they look from the outside in versus how they look from God's perspective. You know, they want to impress man instead of impressing God. And I just posted something on Instagram about it today where it's never been easier to fake you being the best version of you. You know, you can go
Right.
juice up a bunch of steroids, which is much more acceptable now than it's ever been. And you can look really,
Right.
really good. You can look like you've got it all together. You can make a clown out of yourself on the internet and post a lot of cheap, clickbait, attention grabbing content, get a bunch of followers. Now you feel like you're famous and you're
Right.
somebody. You can scam your way into some money. It's never been easier than it is today to fake becoming the version of you that God had in mind when he created you. And the unfortunate part about it is faking it's a lot faster, but doing it the right way lasts a lot longer. From what I've seen. And this is something I struggle with. Like as a 28-year-old, sometimes I look around on social media and it seems like every 22-year-old guy in Miami is ripped and driving a Lamborghini. And it's like, and he might be for now, but how long are you going to be around? Let's check back with that same kid 10 years
Right.
from now. Let's see if he's not addicted to drugs and alcohol. Let's see if he hasn't lost it all and gone bankrupt. Let's see how he's doing spiritually. Does he have a family? And it's a challenge because it's so tempting. But I've been blessed to be around a lot of people, like we started the show talking about. And when you look at the ETs and the Ed Milet's and the Deion Sanders and the Tony, like all of these the John Maxwell's, the heavy hitters who have not just had a 5-year run, but have had a
Right.
50-year, stake in this industry and really changed things. These guys are rooted. These guys have a foundation. They didn't do it the fast way. They did
Mhm.
the hard work and it took them longer, but it lasted a lot longer and the impact was much more significant because of it. And that's just something we have to keep front of mind all the time, especially in today's microwave mentality age.
Well, yeah. I mean, you brought it up, man. I mean, how many guys in Miami's have rented that car for an hour to get the photos, right? So,
They posted it for the next 3 months, but they rented it for
right,
an hour.
right. And that's what and I think that foundation and never leaving it. I was on a call with Eric actually Friday, and he even made the point. He's like, I still go to schools, right? I
Right.
still talk to the kids, man. I still do this stuff, and just keeping grounded and rooted and where who you are, what you are, and even what got you there. Like, I guarantee if he never made another penny from public speaking, he would still be going to them schools, man, like getting to them kids because he understands there's so many of this younger generation that's just lost, man. And they find their identity in how many likes I get on this. That's their whole identity. It's like what is everyone else thinking of me, and do they like what I'm doing? And from that, I think that the danger in that is losing your true authenticity of who you are, because now you're trying to fit boxes and you're trying to get into, well, this worked. Well, I guess if I do this a little bit more, and some of the most successful people I know, they're not compromising in the authenticity of who they are. And I think there was a danger in that, especially when the whole cancel culture was just out of control. It was like, okay, well, I'm going to try to fit this box because if I talk about Christ or if I talk about this or certain political things or whatever, I'm done. And so I'm not going to be who I'm truly am and who God's made me and what my true beliefs are. I'm going to be this version that I think other people are going to want, and I think that's a real danger in today's world is being authentic. And then the other, you had mentioned this a minute ago, of having those lived experiences. I think that's where so many of our younger generation is having an issue because they're not living life. they're in their freaking phones and they're on this stuff all the time, or they're in VR and this fantasy stuff. They're not living life. They're not around people. They don't even know how to communicate half the time. I mean, heaven forbid, have a face-to-face conversation with somebody and talk, or even, I used to laugh when my boys were teenagers, and they're like, yeah, so-and-so texted me, they broke up with me. I was like, did y'all talk about any of this? They're like, no, or they just stopped communicating, right? Like, I'm out, no words, no nothing. And it's like that power of communication, and having those true, I believe we are such spiritual and connected beings that's that problem that most people are, I think they feel inauthentic, and I think they feel a very lack of purpose for their life. And that's where I think if you look at the craziness that's going on in today's world, people are just trying to glob on to these different things or these different movements that's going on because they don't have any purpose for themselves. So they're just trying to find something. And then they find a group of people that make them feel good about themselves for the moment. And all of a sudden they're down these rabbit holes, whether, I mean, if you want to look at something, the most absurd thing, people really protesting against law and order. Like, that's one of the most normal things ever, right? Like, everyone wants safe communities and safe streets. And it's like, that's the most basic common everything. But you literally have people protesting against straight up law and order or safe neighborhoods. And it's like, how did you get to that point? Or where is your real purpose in life? Like, is that really your purpose, to say, I want chaos and murder in the streets? I doubt it. But you get around these people that fill your head and just pump all this up to where all of a sudden now in your head you rationalize it. You're like, hey, this makes perfect sense.
Well, it's so funny you bring that up. I've been philosophizing and meditating on that exact topic for a while now, due to just some people in my life that I've noticed that trend with, and I'm trying to help them out, man. I'm trying to get to them, trying to bless them. But I truly believe that the over intellectualization of rationality and of logical thinking, to be able to twist reality and to be able to embrace subjective morality to an extent where things that even in your gut you just know are not really right, but you can force it to make sense because you're so freaking smart. That is literally the root, I would argue, of evil. If you think about what happened in the garden, it's, hey, to your point, you shall, you shall, you shall. It's paradise. It's a perfect world. There's just one thing you can't do, which is eat from this tree. And then the serpent comes along and says, do you really believe that? You really believe that that's wrong? You really believe that that's what's evil? You really think that's what's going to be off limits for you? You're smart. You can figure this out. I mean, think about it. You can rationalize this. Like, it's just a tree. You can eat the fruit, right? Right?
Right.
And that's the Luciferian intellect. It's thinking that we're so prideful and so smart that we have the ability to override basic morality, and not to be too philosophical with it. But if you look at every great tragedy of the 20th century, that's a common thread. Hitler sat there and said, I know better than everybody. I'm smarter than everybody. I can rationalize this. It makes sense in my mind. And I'm such a good articulate communicator that I can make it make sense to a bunch of other people too. And that's how you get genocide,
Right.
And I think that a lot of times we do not explore or think about the consequences of that type of thinking. You don't need to rationalize everything. You don't need to be able to use your intellect to justify things that are pretty well established or not good for you and others. That's not that doesn't mean you're smart. It means that you're smart enough to do it, but you're not smart enough to understand the consequences thereof.
Right. Well, and I think that's the biggest danger for most people. The easiest way to ever rationalize anything is to ourselves in our own head, right? Like, we can make anything sound amazing and perfectly rational. And then you tell it to someone else and they're looking at you like, what are you
You sure,
talking
bro?
about? Like, what? But in your head, and I think that's, again, when you go back to men saying, I can handle it, a big problem is isolation.
Mm-hmm.
With men. They don't have that circle of people. They don't go out. They don't have that those people around them that will help them. And so we just sit there and we isolate, and then we rationalize all this stuff in our heads, man. And most people, and you think about the biggest trick of the devil, it's isolation. right? I think that's why COVID was so insidious in so many ways, because so many people were so isolated. And so if you look at that, how many suicides and depression and everything just ramped so crazy because everyone was just to themselves. And again, when you think about our most primal instinct ever is to survive, but yet you can rationalize in your head that life's not worth it. I'm gonna take, like, you have to get to that point where you literally have rationalized to yourself that you're going against your most primal inside. I just listened to Marcus Luttrell lives not too far from here. If you think about that primal instinct of him to survive, right? Broken back, shot to hell, like, everything he went through, but to just survive. But yet people can rationalize in their head. They're thinking it's not worth it, man. And in that one moment, they've gotten to that point and they've never, again, they isolate themselves. They don't talk to anybody. They don't get around, man. They don't understand because they're just like, I can handle it. And then you get to that point where you're just like, you out,
And just real quick on that point, that is a form of self-worship, which is a violation of the first commandment. Thou shalt worship no other gods before me. And when you begin to think that you know better than God, or that your plan is better than his, or that you get to be able to call the shots in that way, I think that is a incredibly dangerous and slippery slope to ever even entertain.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect way to end this, man. I know you have to run, but that's it, man. It's understanding who you are, and again, not having that self, man, to really worship the creator, and understanding that, man, this temporary moment, it's fleeting. It's not permanent, and and I think that's the most tragic thing. I mean, like, so my wife's dad actually committed suicide when she was 9. I mean, she lived that through that, and it's like, man, what it's, that temporary problem, it's not a permanent deal, man. Like, it's it. But again, it's crazy how, and I think that's, again, having some people around you that you can truly trust and just be truly transparent and authentic with, so important, because we're all going to go through stuff, and I think that's where, and especially, again, I go back to this, I think especially for men. I mean, women have their little circles, right? Like, it's more common for them, but being able to be vulnerable to people around you that you can truly trust, and that will give you the wisdom that you need, or the support or the guidance or whatever, and again, be very truthful with you about what you're going through, or the slopes that you're going down, or this or that. And it's so important. And that's where, I'm constantly seeking out other mentors and other friends, and just, but you have to have those core guys, man, that know you, that truly know you, man, and be like, bro, we didn't have a chat, because you're not having it. But man, Brandon, again, I truly enjoyed this. Thank you so much for taking your time, and for sharing some wisdom with us today, man. So with that, guys, we'll end it, and we'll see you next week. Take care.